All right. Millennial pause in check in the house. So this section that we're going to do today, I'm just going to jump right in with what the benefit of this is. This is a two-parter. And the interruption assessment, we're on page, let's see, like it's 279 in the Parinama Method book. And what you'll see here, I'm just going to show you while I have the book up, is that there is a little bit of a chart here. And if you either don't want to use the book or don't have the book and just want to use a piece of paper, go for it. And you can make the little grid with kind of similar to like what we did last time. Let me find it like this. The hub number 1 through 7, and then the rating in the other column. So this is called hub assessment, which it could really, oh gosh, I'm a little disjointed this morning. So I'm going to have to figure out how to sort of bring it in. Just give me a minute, a second, rather, a couple of seconds. Okay, so part 1 of this book is really about describing like anyway, I'm not going to talk about part 1. I'm going to talk about part 2, which has each of the hub sections. And appears I'm not super articulate today, so we're just going to make do with that, see what happens. But part 2 is this deep dive into this, like the inner exploration and the addition of the somatic practices and techniques that are, it's very much about like looking in to the sort of axis mundi, like the central point of which our life emanates from, which is like from our individual experience, from who we are, from our personal power, from our relationship with ourselves. And admittedly, it's very like it's really contrary to just even in and of itself for it to be unapologetically like interior without being like, how am I going to help others first? It's like, how am I going to, how am I going to mend the division within myself? How am I going to unify the I don't know, maybe like fractured aspects of the self and bring it together? And so admittedly, it's kind of like, and I mentioned this yesterday in the reading, is that folks that can become a sort of a island of, what is it? It's like there's a Greek myth for it, like where it's kind of like you just go to this island and it's like, it's a place. Oh my gosh, this is interesting. I'm kind of like sort of like, it's like I can understand the idea, but I can't articulate it. So it's a very sixth hub, because like I can see it, I can understand it, but I can't bring it down into like words. So it actually makes sense, but I won't get into why. And what ultimately this is, like in part 3, and it's just occurred to me, I mean, it's been sort of coming out over the last few readings, but like, and this in particular, the interruption assessment, it just occurred to me that this is about returning into the world in a very particular way. It's about, okay, so now what, like, as far as, it's like, what is the end game here? what's the end game? That actually was one of the first things that came up yesterday, which was like wound up being like a 50-minute, like to an hour session on like 2 paragraphs. And admittedly, I can already tell this would be a really probably kind of a hard one to watch because I'm kind of like like a little more expansive than I prefer to be, but it is at this point. So it's kind of like, well, what's the end game? And I think if you look at like this is the interruption assessment, and then the next section is the hub, the different hub patterns, like the distributions. And it might be like, oh, is this like we figure out where we're strong, and now we start to figure, it's like really focus on like the weaknesses and it's like build this like perfect human, and so yeah, this is gonna be a little bit more of a slow going one because it was coming like it was just whatever the state of mind I'm in. But so this assessment process it's about bringing self-awareness in because we've gone through each of the hubs and now it's like seeing like relative to each other which ones are actually like the most predominant, like the ones that kind of absorb the most like energy of our lives and attention and fixation and whatever. And so it's looking at that and it's coming to a place of self-awareness, but it's not necessarily intended to be one where we're looking for the creation of perfection. It's like, okay, well, we assessed I'm strong here and here's where I could use some work. It actually has a lot more to do with how we work with other people. And so, one of the things I think that is real, and I'll talk about this from a leadership perspective, is that as, and in all facets, that the whole idea that to be a leader means that you know more than everyone else, like that knowledge is like it is like the establishment of, it's like I know more or I'm better at everything than other people. And that can create a lot of defensiveness because like that's not actually what would make anybody a good leader. It's helpful sometimes is sort of like an easy swing to be like better at stuff than people. But the thing is you're better in your way. And to be a leader, it's really about sort of like a broader aperture in terms of what's possible in terms and allowing more into like the achievement and the actualization of a group than just what's possible for you. And that in and of itself winds up making things much more extraordinary things possible because you're allowing more things in than just what your capabilities are. So, wow. Yeah. So the example I'll use is that as, when I was coming up in my like professional career, that I had been an individual salesperson. And, when I became a manager, I was like really like, oh my God, am I supposed to be, the so-called imposter syndrome that was just defensiveness about trying to defend, being scared that I'd be it would be like, reveal that I didn't belong in the position or that it would be that people would just be better than me. And and then that would like usurp my position. And probably on some level validate me being not valuable. It's like, oh, they're even better at me at the individual job and blah, blah, blah. Like all this stuff. And so the interruption assessment in a practical sense is less about, it's kind of can be about whatever it has to be about, but the intention, I would say, is is just to put a bit of a lens on self-awareness, and then once we look at the hub distributions, it's understanding where you're strong and leaning into that, and then collaborating and working with people that are strong in the places where you are not. And so an example of this is that, and I think I've talked about this in readings before, is that there's a whole, there's like an analytics component to like running an organization, and operations, and it requires a lot of detail work where, a lot of time in spreadsheets, a lot of time looking at reports, a lot of time building reports, a lot of times like checking through like onerous amounts of data, looking into systems, looking into the back ends of systems, understanding how they work, understanding how they work with other systems, looking at other people. And so one of the things that's really important is that you actually have, to be, a good leader, is that you actually have a handle on the data, the information. It's not anecdotal. And that's one of the things that some leaders that are pretty like nefarious do, is that they like do a lot of mind control and sort of emotional manipulation in lieu of actually being able to see things clearly and operate things from a perspective of like what's actually best for the organization. Aside from like the opinion of a person who holds, outsized amount of power, really, I mean, ultimately. And, so you obviously can see why some people choose just to be like, hey, I kind of like think this way, so this is how it's going to go, versus like really wanting to understand what the like underlying phenomenon is to the best of your ability. And so it's important for me, or was important. And the thing is it was like very hard for me, like as far as like it would, like I just didn't get into flow states, and I would just get increasingly agitated. And I used to think, because I had a boss who was like, all my peers in the leadership team had MBAs from like, Stanford and Dartmouth and all these like top tier, universities, that it like that was kind of placed in my head that it's like this was like this huge deficit for me, because they were really good at crunching numbers and like looking at data. And so I had this idea that was like, this is like this thing I have to hide. It's like I have to hide this fact about myself. I have to overcompensate. I have to work until 2 in the morning. I have to work all weekend to cover the fact that I like didn't know how to do all these like sort of office level proficiencies that people learned in business school. And so, I mean, I have this like memory of a presentation I had to put together, and I like just didn't know really how to do it. I spent like the whole weekend just like kind of in paralysis about it, not doing any work, but just like being fixated on the fact I wasn't doing work about it. And the thing is that so that like wound up really draining me. It took a lot of my energy. It was being constantly fixated on like, how do I solve for this thing? Meanwhile, I was building an organization through leadership. So through understanding people, understanding the business, understanding a bigger picture, having a vision, having clarity, having a lot of clarity, like understanding how to message, how to talk about things, how to work with people, how to structure teams, how to build them, how to distribute them, how to, build out the infrastructure. And we were it's like the revenue is hundreds of millions of dollars, and I built it from zero. So there's a reason I was in that group of like other of men. They were all men. Um, it's like there's a reason that the person with like a state school education and that was also like a woman was in this group of these like very, white guys with like MBAs from top tier schools. And it was because I was really good at my job. And I spent a lot of my time while I was in that job being really scared about not belonging and being really scared about the thing that I figured was like, okay, this is the thing I have to solve for. I have to solve for the fact that I'm not good at this thing by getting better at it. So here's the thing, so when I eventually, yeah, actually, I'm not gonna like that. The rest of that story doesn't really matter. Um, the point being that when I built teams in the future, the first hire that I always made was a director of operations. Always. 'Cause it was like, I'm gonna figure out how to sell this. I'm gonna figure out the kind of like who the market is, like who are the people we sell this to, like why does this matter to them? Why do they want to buy it? Like how do we do that? And it's just like in the beginnings of building an organization. I was just like, I'm gonna be boots on the ground. I'm gonna do a lot of the practical stuff that figures things out so that we build off of a level of insight versus just starting to build and then fixing retroactively, which is really tough because it usually means that you've hired people that aren't a fit. So I'm always trying to avoid that because that winds up causing it's like really hard on a really new growing organization to have the wrong people. So anyway, point being is that I really surrendered to the fact that it's like my frustration builds extraordinarily when I'm like sitting looking in a spreadsheet and having to spend hours. I've like probably in the best of times I've like about 40 minutes. And then after that 40 minutes, there's this like sort of tension growing in me of like an agitated. It's like, oh, like, so what's my point? My point is that like in this assessment of understanding our strengths and playing to them, um, if I were to return to that dynamic, the amount of bandwidth I would have had, and just the amount of time spent being sad and angry and like frustrated with myself and feeling like I don't belong and feeling defensive and feeling like I had to work harder than I did. I mean, I was outperforming everybody by to the point it was ridiculous. And I was feeling like I was the biggest piece of shit who like didn't belong anywhere, where it's like objectively, if you look at my performance relative to other people, they're the ones that didn't belong. But I couldn't see that because I was so wrapped up in my sense of like, these are the things I wasn't good at, looking at those versus like really inventorying the things that I was great at. And so before we get into this reading, I'm going to say that, when I work with people, one of the first things that I do is I review their work and and I find the things in it that I think are extraordinary, and I talk to them about that. So, are you aware that this facet of your work is really extraordinary? So that's it. But so let's talk about the interruption assessment. Yeah. Well, so and we're going to do the exercise. And so the thing that the exercise as it exists in the book is pretty sparse. But so I'm going to color it in a little bit if you want to follow along. The interruption assessment. So everyone has a different overall pattern of hubs, depending on a combination of our natural born biological inclinations, life circumstances, and experiences. What we seek in this process is to cultivate awareness, play to our strengths, and to try collaborations with others where we're not strong. The method isn't about building the perfect human. It's about fully becoming who you already are, making the most of your miraculous life, and working in concert with others in the world around you. As the serenity prayer adopted by the 12-step program puts it, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change and the courage and the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Which human right do you struggle with? And which boundaries could use the most attention? See Chapter 2. Using the All Human Rights worksheet below, rate the amount of importance you currently place on each hub from 1 to 10. A lower rating represents an area you don't think about often, and a higher rating represents a greater level of focus. The hubs with lower scores may need more attention, and those with higher scores may benefit from some release and discharge. Right? There's that. And also, one thing is in the book, I think it's like page 26, where you have the human rights and the boundaries. Yeah. If you feel so inclined, take a look at those. So let's do it. Let us do it. I'm going to look here really quickly on the other side of this page. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in the next reading on page 280, I'm going to talk about the different distributions, but let's start looking at ours. And a reminder, if you can press pause and make a sheet yourself just with 2 columns that have 7 rows, and number one of the columns the hub, the hub, and the next the rating. It's the bespoke way of doing it. So this is 1 out of 7. So the first, and as you can see, it's like the prompt in this is the hub, and the right is physical security. I'm going to talk a little bit more. I'm going to give a little bit more of a prompt into this. So this is what we think about, what we fixate about, what we believe to be true, what takes our energy. So for the first hub, physical security. So what does this mean? Do you think about your bills a lot? Do you think about your health? Do you worry about getting sick? Do you worry about losing your job? Do you have fixation on like health-related things? Fixation on exercise? Fixation on anything that's to do with your possessions, your home? Fear of losing them? Fear of losing anything that is like the fear of loss of the physical component of your life. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being like, yeah, I don't really think about that at all, and 10 being like, that occupies a lot of my thoughts. Give that a rating. And one of the things I'm going to point out here is that with this practice, these inclinations don't necessarily go away as much as we become aware of them when we understand what they are. So when they show up, we have like the tools to be able to kind of meet them and kind of right size them. Because one of the things about fear is that the feeling of fear is not the actual reality of whether something is requiring of being that fearful. Like the level of threat is not directly proportional to the level of fear that we have. So with that, meeting the fear and being able to contextualize it a little bit and like work with our nervous system. Okay, next. The second hub, feeling and enjoyment. So, how much time do you spend thinking about things that comfort you? How much time do you spend on things that like eating for comfort, shopping, maybe drinking, any, so-called vices that kind of calm you and soothe you, make you feel better, kind of like if you're feeling like kind of overwhelmed or upset, that they comfort you. Watching a lot of TV, like curled up. This isn't judging, not judging. Thinking about sex, thinking about your feelings. Give that a scale of 1 to 10. Once again, 1 is like, I don't actually think about this at all, and 10 being like, it's all the time. And then somewhere in between with the other numbers. Now, the third hub is how focused on freedom, power, and taking action. So here I would think about career. How often do you think, to what extent do you think about your job a lot? And not in the sense of making money and the physical security that it provides, but like the doing of it representing the expression of yourself and your life, the amount of power, feeling like whether you feel disempowered or powerful, self-conscious, how much time do you spend feeling like embarrassed? But I would specifically do like focus here on career. Like how much time do you spend thinking about your career, your job, the different facets of it? And I one of the things on this I'd point to is, to what extent do you feel like your job is like an ultimate reconciliation of like, if that could just work out, then everything is going to be like everything else works out. So 1 to 10. How much of your identity is in your job, in your livelihood? And even in that, thinking about like your boss, how much time do you think about like your boss? How much time do you think about the people who work for you? How much time do you think about like doing, it's like wanting to do things that you're going to do? So 1 to 10 on that. Once again, 1 being like never, like I don't even really recognize that as something to think about, and 10 being like all the time. And then, different gradation in between. So number 4, fourth hub is connections, relationships, and love. So this would be one where how much time, like to what extent do you think about like separation and isolation? Um the challenges in your relationships. Think about all the other people that you're responsible for. Think about what people think of you, whether people like you, whether people love you. If you spend time thinking about being, it's like you're not being worthy. It's like, am I worth love? Is it thinking about fear of being exiled or abandoned. But one of this is just how often you're spending time just thinking about people, worrying about things for them that have kind of nothing to do with you. If you're a boss, how much do you spend just a lot of time thinking about the people in your organization? But just about them personally, worrying about them, caring about them, caring. How much time do you spend caring? And this sounds like, I mean, there's no judgment in any of these. I mean, this is just like really about like the headspace, like what's in the headspace. Family. So this is like connections, relationships, and love. It's like how much of sort of your inner life is spent contemplating other people, contemplating your relationships with people, wanting more connection. So it's a 1 through 10. 1 is like, I don't think about it at all. Even I'd put animals in there. Definitely children. One thing to think is like, even like what are the descriptors that you'd use to describe yourself? Is it like mother, boss, aunt, neighbor, cousin, aunt, like whatever? Like it's like how much of one's identity, and like and it's not even identity, it's just like how much of this, like what kind of consumes my consciousness, like reflexively. So it's 1 through 10. 1 is like nope, never, and 10 is like all the time. So number 5, the 5th hub. So telling the truth or being lied to is the prompt here. So how much time, so one of the things would be like, how much time do you spend feeling like like the things that you want to say, you can't say. Like you can't tell the truth or you'd be in trouble, or it would like completely put your like situations at risk if you were to say the truth, if you just say what you really think. Now, this is true for everyone, but it's like, how much time do you think about that? How much time do you spend going through in your head the things that you want to say? Because everybody does this. This is part of like functioning in society, is to what extent that one does this. And it also has a lot to do with power, how much relative power people have, their ability to like speak out and tell the truth. So how much time do you think about like wishing you could say what you want to say and repeating those thoughts and like kind of, and then on the flip side is being lied to, thinking about they're not telling me the truth, they're lying to me. Being very conscious of the deception from others. So this is in the 5th hub. And by telling the truth, I also mean expressing yourself. Now, it doesn't, whether these things are necessarily like true or not is like, that's not it. It's really like how much time is spent, like really, like how important is this to you? Wanting to speak up for others. Feeling very like a lot of concentration on wanting to speak up for others. Maybe you do. And maybe that is a big part of who you are, is speaking up. One of the other things is like writing. And like organizing your self-awareness and your truth and expressing that and expressing it. So how important that is to you. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 is like, it's not part of what I think about. 10 is like, I think about it all the time. That's all I think about. And 6, 2 more to go. You're doing great. Vision and validation of being seen. Do you feel seen for who you truly are? Do you feel invisible in areas of your life? Do you spend time feeling frustrated about feeling not unseen by people that matter to you? Do you feel frustrated by just not being seen in general? Are your ideas, do you think about your ideas a lot? And these would just be, I would say that this is really like vision for, how things should be, how you'd like them to be. Ideas for, your like even vision in terms of understanding and seeing things clearly that exist and spending time actively wanting to understand things in a sense of like seeing it clearly. But as far as like thinking, it's like thinking about ideas. And I would even put into this is about like your physical presentation. So what you look like, how you dress, how you express yourself, to be seen as who you are, like in a way. So this would be something where it's like how much time and sort of like energy is put into really either suppressing yourself or suppressing the expression of yourself with your like physical presentation, and how much time and energy goes into that one way or the other, whether it's like a suppression of who you are, where it's like I'm going to wear like a gray blazer when I want to be wearing like a paint splattered muumuu with a crown or something like that. I don't know where that came from. It's like that's really random. With big gold earrings. I don't know. But just that, like if that feels like something that's very, like it's just really important. It's like I live in an area where you just see some people where you're like, oh, what a blessing. Like just fully expressed in this very unique way with style. Just like a flower. So this is expressed in a lot of different ways. But I think one of the things would be like, do you feel seen for who you are? And in that, do you feel seen for who you are in your vision? Is your vision your idea for how things should be respected and really seen as well? So how much time is that? Like what part of you is that? Is that important to you? Is that important to you? Does that feel like something that's sort of like aches or like it's a forcing function? And so that would be like between 1 and 10, right? So 1 is like, yeah, I actually don't think about that a lot. 10 is like, it's a really important thing to me. And last but certainly not least is 7, knowledge and concentration. So this one would be about like just information. Contemplation, reading, listening to podcasts, sort of writing. It's about information. It's about understanding. How much time do you spend thinking about God? It's things that are like not necessarily like super embodied. Like I would say this is something that is like where it's more like in the expansive like notion of contemplation, but it's also like having a level of concentration with that. This is like a sustained concentration on that. I don't love that as a prompt. I don't think that's that helpful. I don't know how helpful this thing would be to do without without a ride along. I think this is probably more like pointing to something than it is to, like, so that I think like talking it through is kind of a thing. And I imagine even talking it through leaves some questions, which you're more than welcome to ask. But knowledge and concentration, like, to me, that this would be a lot more just, like, time spent being very, like, very contemplative, wondering about the universe. There's an aspect of this paranormal methodology that has that quality in it, because it was, like, born out of that, is that it's like finding answers, inquiry. This, I think, is probably be like I don't know, to me, it strikes me as, like, probably the least common, but who knows? Like, who am I to know? But the thing of, like, wondering about God, wondering, like, the big questions, like, "Why am I here? What's my," like, that kind of stuff, being in that space, being like, "What's my purpose?" Like, and this, I think this would be, I'd actually characterize this more of, like, questions where it's, like, the seeking of knowledge, like, seeking to know. From a position of being like, of being not knowing. It's like, all I know is I know nothing, kind of thing. And then the concentration component of it would be, I don't know if that's really the right thing for this, but, like meditation, like spaciousness, concentrated spaciousness. So this kind of thing. It's like wondering about God, wondering about knowledge, wondering about understanding, wondering about the, like, but a big thing for this, I think, for this exercise, is like wondering about yourself. Actually, I would redraft that. I would say that it really is wondering about, like, what your life, what role it plays in a bigger picture, what your relationship is with God or divinity or the universe or whatever. So, yeah, that's it. That's what that should have been. So thanks for workshopping that with me. So 1 through 10, 1 is like, hey, not something I care about. And 10 is like, yeah, this is like sort of a big thing. So, to go back through each of those and just kind of like look at it. Just be like, yep, physical security, like emotion. And a lot of like the thing in this is about like managing like the like overwhelm of emotion in the second hub for here as I see it. I won't go through each of them, 3 being power, individuality kind of thing, 4 relationships and connection, so, and just look through those, like, and it's just kind of, and so I'll give a little spoiler alert here about the next step on this. Boop. And I'll say that this is actually one that is, to do this in this format, it really helps to be able, like, I think, for people to feel like they can be, like, heard and ask questions, but so I'm hearing you out on that, if that feels like a thing. So just to give, like, this will be the next session, is I'm gonna go through the reading here on page 280 and 281, which is like the patterns of the hubs, and one is lower dominant, so it's higher numbers in hubs 1 through 3 relative to the other hubs. That is me, I think. This might be an ongoing "that is me" for anybody. Be like, "Yeah, I relate to that." Because the upper dominant hubs, so higher numbers in hubs 5 through 7 relative to other hubs. Oh, I'm really looking forward to reading these. I have, like, very strong sensibilities around this stuff. And this comes from having had, like, been, I guess, like, a boss of a lot of people, and really wanting people to shine and really actualize. So I don't know, it just does something for me to read this. It's like, ooh, I can't wait to talk about this. So middle hub dominant, it's a higher number in the third hub relative to other hubs. Middle gap. Lower number in the fourth hub relative to the other hubs. Then balanced numbers are fairly consistent throughout all the hubs. Yeah. So lower dominant, upper dominant, then middle dominant, and then middle gap. So if you have the book, I guess you can read ahead, but if you don't, you could just kind of wait and contemplate this. And, one of the things, and I've already read through this page like 20, around 26, is the human rights as they're associated with each of the hubs, and the human right being that it's not something that needs to be earned, though we're societally like there's a lot of constructs that kind of create that, which is that to be safe is something you have to earn, meritocracy, right? So it can be kind of confronting. And then it gets internalized into us, and it's like, oh, we're anxious all the time because we're afraid. But anyway. Yeah, it's really, I think that, so the interruption really is, it's kind of, and also looking at, it's like, okay, where we're fixated, where we spend a lot of time, it's just another way to look at ourselves and just be like cultivating awareness in a way that is just it, like where there's just some introspection, like room for just understanding and introspection. And, I spent a lot of time talking about, an early experience of mine where, the thing that I wasn't good at, I was really ashamed of, and it created a lot of like tension, and it, quite frankly, it really held me back. And it really, in a lot of ways, it created a lot of um like anxiety, emotional overload, because it's pressing on stuff I didn't have awareness about yet. So yeah. Yeah, so there's just nothing you need to, it's not really like you're there's nothing wrong with you. We're accountable for who we are. It's like accountability and just acceptance in the place of shame, in the place of embarrassment, or the place of feeling less than. It's just like, yeah, it's just who I am. It's like, and in the place where it's like, yeah, I'd like to kind of do better with that. Like, and so I'm in earnest going to make attempts to understand this part of myself and improve it in a way. But not from a place of, if I'm changing, I'm working with this to stop myself from being like flawed. It's like even if you change nothing and you could just completely accept yourself in a way where you're not defending yourself, or kind of trying to make other people like defending yourself, like, oh no, there's nothing. Yeah, defending yourself. It's just like, even if you change nothing, if you're exactly as you are, but the only thing that you change is acceptance. That's enough. It's enough, because out of acceptance, just like transformation will just naturally unfold. And this is actually, that's part of the thing I think it's important about the passivity of some of this, which is that it's almost like all of Parinama, it's gotten us to page 279, is really about the exploration and contemplation in the service of seeing that there's nothing wrong with you, so that you can accept yourself. And once we accept ourselves as we are, Like the love naturally returns. The recognition of things naturally returns. Is it pleasant? Hasn't been my experience that it's pleasant. The naturally occurring, even when it's naturally occurring, it's still hard. The releasing of held things, but it's there for it's there for you. It's there for you. It's there for you, you know? I like all these jokes I want to make, but I don't know why. I don't know. Yeah, I do know why. But yeah. Okay. So that is it. Thank you for coming along. I'm so grateful for you. Mhm. Yeah. I'm grateful. And I love having you along for this. So thank you. Thank you. And I will see you next time when we'll do the distributions. I'm very excited about this. And I guess I'll say, per usual, any comments I will respond to. There used to be a guy who'd ask me questions about gloves because he no longer asked them. I'm not gonna say I miss him, but I guess I kind of miss him. So random. I was here for it. No, but anyway, just all joking aside. And if you have anything that you don't want to put in a public comment, but you want to ask me, the Parinama Method on Instagram, you can DM me, and I tend to respond. It matters a lot to me to be what you think. It matters a lot to me what how you're responding to this, and to the best of my ability, you know. And sometimes, and I'll tell you, I'm very clear about what that is as far as the boundary of about like this is like what I'll respond to and to what extent. But I just want you to know at the core it's really important to me. You are. So I will see you next time. Thank you. Bye bye.